September 2023. In one hospital in New York, a miracle happened when a 63-year-old woman defied all odds and gave birth to a healthy baby girl. At that age, it was almost impossible, but while everyone was celebrating the arrival, someone was not happy. No one knew who or why, but one thing was clear: the celebration wouldn't last. In just a matter of days, the same woman was rushed to the hospital again, not because of her baby or complications from childbirth, but something far more life-threatening. To save her life, her hands and legs were amputated. But what had happened to her? Who was behind this? And will the truth ever be revealed? Welcome to True Crime Chronicles. Thanks for your support. Stay tuned for gripping true crime stories. Don't forget to subscribe. Margaret Sullivan was 63 years old when she discovered she was pregnant. She lived in Houston, Texas with her husband Derek, who was 26. The pregnancy shocked everyone who knew them. At her age, natural conception was almost impossible. Fertility specialists examined her medical records and called it biologically extraordinary. One doctor said he had never seen anything like it in his 30-year career. Another doctor insisted she deliver in a major medical center that specialized in high-risk geriatric births. The decision was made quickly. Margaret would travel to New York because hospitals there had the expertise and equipment needed for such a rare case. Local news stations in Texas heard about her story and wanted to interview her. Margaret agreed to a few interviews. She wanted to share her joy with the world. In the interviews, she glowed. She talked about nursery colors and baby names. She talked about finally becoming a mother after so many years of hoping. She showed off the tiny clothes she had already bought. She laughed when reporters asked about the age difference between her and Derek. "Love doesn't have an age limit," she said. "God brought us together for a reason." Friends and relatives were happy for her. They had watched her struggle through loneliness for so many years after her first marriage ended. They knew how much she had always wanted children. They knew how painful it was for her when it never happened. Now, decades later, she was getting her miracle. Some friends threw her a baby shower. Others sent gifts and cards. Everyone celebrated with her. But neighbors noticed things. They whispered to each other when Margaret and Derek weren't around. They wondered why a 26-year-old man would marry a woman nearly 40 years older. Some thought it was sweet, a real love story. Others were more skeptical. They noticed that Derek didn't work. They noticed that Margaret paid for everything. They noticed that Derek drove a new car that Margaret had bought him. But no one said anything out loud. It wasn't their business. Margaret didn't care what anyone thought. She was happy. But inside, something was shifting. The pregnancy had changed things in ways Margaret couldn't see. What had started as a manageable situation was becoming complicated. A baby meant responsibilities. A baby meant public attention. A baby meant ties that couldn't be easily broken. And for someone, that was a problem. Before we continue, if you're finding this story gripping, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who loves true crime as much as you do. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Now, let's continue. On August 28, 2023, Margaret and Derek boarded a flight from Houston to New York. Margaret was nervous during the flight. Her pregnancy made travel uncomfortable, but she was determined to see this through. Derek sat beside her, holding her hand during takeoff. He brought her snacks from his carry-on bag. He adjusted her pillow when she tried to rest. To anyone watching, he seemed like a devoted husband taking care of his pregnant wife. They landed at LaGuardia Airport in the early afternoon. The airport was crowded and loud. Margaret felt overwhelmed, but Derek helped her navigate through the terminal. He carried both of their bags. He flagged down a taxi. He gave the driver the address of their rental apartment. The apartment was small but comfortable. It was close to Mount Sinai Hospital, which was the whole point. Margaret was relieved when they finally arrived. Over the next few days, Margaret rested while Derek explored the neighborhood. He said he wanted to find good places to eat and figure out the best routes to the hospital. Margaret stayed in the apartment most of the time. She watched television. She talked to friends and family on the phone. She told everyone how excited she was. She told them how good Derek was being to her. What Margaret didn't know was that Derek's explorations had a different purpose. On August 28, 2023, at 11:47 a.m., he walked into a small herbal shop in Lower Manhattan. The shop was tucked between two larger stores, easy to miss. Inside, the shelves were lined with jars and packages of dried herbs, powders, and extracts. Derek browsed the shelves slowly. He picked up a few jars and read the labels. He seemed to be looking for something specific. After a few minutes, he approached the counter. The shop owner, a man in his late 50s, greeted him. "Can I help you find something?" he asked. Derek nodded. "I'm looking for something strong," he said, "something herbal that could help with digestive issues." The shop owner pulled out a few options. He explained what each one did and how to use it. Derek listened carefully. Then he pointed to one in particular. "What about this one?" he asked. The shop owner looked at the label. It was amatoxin extract. "That's very strong," the shop owner said. "You have to be careful with it. Too much can be dangerous." Derek nodded. "I understand," he said. The shop owner hesitated, but eventually agreed to sell it. The price was $340. Derek paid in cash, using crisp $20 bills. The shop owner placed the vial in a small paper bag and handed it to Derek. Then he pulled out a handwritten ledger. "I need you to sign here," he said. "For products like this, I keep a record." Derek didn't hesitate. He signed his full name, Margaret Sullivan. He wrote the date, August 29, 2023. Then he left the shop. Outside, Derek walked 3 blocks before stopping at a park bench. He sat down and opened the paper bag. He took out the vial and held it up to the light. The powder inside was fine and pale. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he put it back in the bag, slipped it into his jacket pocket, and continued walking. Back at the apartment, Margaret asked Derek how his walk went. "Good," he said. "I found a few nice spots. There's a deli nearby that looks decent." Margaret smiled. "That's great," she said. "Maybe we can go there together before the appointment." Derek nodded. "Yeah, maybe." That evening, Margaret posted on Facebook. She uploaded a photo of herself sitting on the couch, her hand resting on her belly. "Almost time to meet our miracle baby," she wrote. Within minutes, comments started pouring in. Friends sent heart emojis and prayers. Her sister Claire commented, "So proud of you. Can't wait to meet my niece or nephew." Margaret smiled as she read through the comments. She felt surrounded by love. Derek sat across the room, scrolling through his own phone. He wasn't reading comments on Margaret's post. He was texting someone else, a woman named Jasmine Washington. "How's New York?" Jasmine asked. "Fine," Derek replied. "Just a few more days." Jasmine sent back a heart emoji. "Can't wait to see you when you get back," she wrote. Derek didn't respond. He put his phone away and looked at Margaret. She was still smiling at her phone, completely unaware. The next few days passed quietly. Margaret had a prenatal appointment. The doctors examined her and confirmed everything was progressing well. They scheduled her induction for September 1st. Margaret was relieved. "Just a few more days," she told Derek. "Then we'll finally meet our baby." Derek nodded. "Yeah," he said, "just a few more days." On September 1st, 2023, Margaret woke up early. She had been feeling contractions throughout the night, but they were mild. By morning, they were stronger and more regular. She woke Derek. "I think it's time," she said. Derek got out of bed quickly. He helped her get dressed and gathered the hospital bag they had packed days earlier. Then he called a taxi. The ride to Mount Sinai Hospital felt long. Margaret gripped Derek's hand as each contraction hit. "You're doing great," Derek said. "We're almost there." When they arrived, nurses were waiting. They had been notified that Margaret was coming.
They helped her into a wheelchair and took her straight to the labor and delivery unit. Labor lasted 14 hours. It was difficult. Margaret was exhausted. The pain was more intense than she had imagined, but the medical team was excellent. They monitored her closely. They adjusted her medications. They encouraged her to keep going. Derek stayed in the room the entire time. He held her hand. He wiped her forehead with a damp cloth. He told her she was strong. At 7:32 p.m., the baby was born. A girl. She weighed 6 pounds, 4 ounces. The delivery room filled with the sound of her crying. Margaret started crying too, but these were tears of joy. "She's here," Margaret whispered. "Our baby is here." The nurses cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a blanket. Then they placed her in Margaret's arms. Margaret looked down at the tiny face. She was overwhelmed. After so many years of waiting, of hoping, of praying, she was finally holding her child. She kissed the baby's forehead. "Hello, Emma," she whispered. She had chosen the name weeks ago. It meant universal. It felt perfect. The nurses gestured for Derek to come closer. "Would you like to hold her?" one of them asked. Derek hesitated. He looked at the baby but didn't move. "Maybe in a minute," he said. The nurse found this odd but didn't push. She made a note in the medical chart. Father appeared distant, did not hold baby immediately. Another nurse noticed Derek's behavior too. Later, she would recall the moment clearly. "He looked at the baby like it was a stranger's child," she said. "There was no excitement, no emotion. He took one photo with his phone, then said he needed some air and left the room." The nurses exchanged glances but said nothing. Some fathers react differently to birth. Maybe he was overwhelmed. Margaret didn't notice any of this. She was too focused on Emma. She counted the baby's fingers and toes. She marveled at her tiny nose and perfect lips. She thanked the doctors and nurses over and over. "You saved our lives," she said. The medical team smiled. "You did all the work," one doctor said. "You're incredibly strong." On September 3, 2023, Margaret was cleared to go home. The doctors gave her discharge instructions. They explained how to care for Emma. They scheduled a follow-up appointment. Margaret listened carefully and took notes. She wanted to do everything right. Derek helped her pack up their things. He carried Emma's car seat. He pushed Margaret in a wheelchair to the hospital entrance while a nurse carried Emma. Outside, a taxi was waiting. Derek buckled Emma's car seat into the back. Then he helped Margaret get in beside her. The drive back to the apartment was quiet. Margaret stared at Emma the entire time. She couldn't believe this was real. That evening, Margaret was exhausted. Her body ached from labor. She was sore and uncomfortable, but she was also happy, happier than she had been in years. Derek noticed how tired she looked. "Why don't you rest?" he said. "I'll keep an eye on Emma." Margaret was grateful. "Thank you," she said. "You're so good to me."
Derek left the bedroom. He went into the kitchen. Margaret could hear him moving around. She assumed he was making himself something to eat. She lay back on the bed and closed her eyes. Emma stirred in the bassinet but didn't wake. Margaret reached over and gently rocked the bassinet. Everything felt perfect. About 20 minutes later, Derek returned. He was carrying a cup of tea. "I made this for you," he said. "It's chamomile. It'll help you relax." Margaret smiled. "You're too sweet," she said. She took the cup from him. The tea was warm and smelled faintly of herbs. She took a sip. It tasted normal, a little bitter, but chamomile always had a slight bitterness to it. Derek sat down beside her. He stroked her hair gently. "You did amazing today," he said. "I'm so proud of you." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for being here with me," she said. "I couldn't have done this without you." Derek leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Get some rest," he said. "You need your strength." Margaret finished the tea. She handed the empty cup back to Derek. "That was perfect," she said. "Thank you." Derek took the cup and left the room. Margaret settled back into the pillows. She felt warm and relaxed. Within minutes, she was asleep. She had no idea that in a few hours, her life would change forever. Margaret woke up at 4:47 a.m. Something was wrong. Her stomach felt like it was on fire. She sat up quickly, but the movement made everything worse. A wave of nausea hit her so hard she barely had time to react. She leaned over the side of the bed and vomited. Her body shook violently. She tried to call for Derek, but her voice came out weak and hoarse. Derek was asleep on the couch in the living room. He had said he wanted to give Margaret space to rest with the baby, but now she needed him. "Derek," she called out. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She tried again, louder this time. "Derek!" He didn't respond. She could hear Emma starting to cry in the bassinet. The sound made Margaret's heart break. She wanted to pick her up, but she couldn't move. Another wave of nausea hit. Margaret vomited again. This time, she noticed something terrifying. There was blood. Not a lot, but enough to scare her. She tried to stand, but her legs wouldn't support her. She collapsed back onto the bed. "Derek!" she screamed. This time, he heard her. Derek walked into the bedroom slowly. He didn't rush. He looked at Margaret lying on the bed, pale and shaking. He looked at the mess on the floor. His face didn't change. "What's wrong?" he asked. His tone was flat, almost annoyed. Margaret was crying now. "Something's wrong," she said. "I'm really sick. I think I need to go to the hospital." Derek crossed his arms. "It's probably just postpartum stuff," he said. "Your body's been through a lot. You just need the rest." Margaret shook her head. "No, this is different," she said. "Please, Derek, this doesn't feel normal." Derek sighed. "Let's wait a few hours," he said. "If you still feel bad, we'll go, but I think you're overreacting." Margaret wanted to argue, but another wave of pain hit her. She doubled over, clutching her stomach. "Please," she whispered. But Derek was already walking out of the room. "I'm going to get some air," he said. "Try to get some rest." Then he left the apartment. Margaret was alone. Emma was still crying. Margaret wanted desperately to comfort her, but she couldn't even lift her head. She lay there listening to her baby cry, feeling her body break down from the inside. She didn't understand what was happening. The delivery had gone well. The doctors had said everything was fine. So why did she feel like she was dying? She tried to get out of bed to reach the phone. She swung her legs over the side and pushed herself up, but as soon as she stood, her legs gave out. She collapsed back to the floor. The impact knocked the wind out of her. She lay there, gasping for breath. Everything hurt. Her stomach, her chest, her head. She couldn't think straight, but Margaret knew she wasn't okay. She knew something was very, very wrong. She managed to grab her phone from the floor. Her vision was getting worse. Everything was blurry. She squinted at the screen and somehow managed to dial 911. The call connected. A dispatcher answered. "911? What's your emergency?" Margaret's voice was barely audible. "I just had a baby. I'm really sick. I think I'm dying. Please help me." The dispatcher's voice was calm and steady. "Okay, I need you to stay on the line with me. What's your address?" Margaret gave her the address of the apartment. Her words were slurred. She was struggling to stay conscious. "Help is on the way," the dispatcher said. "Just stay with me. An ambulance is coming. You're going to be okay." Margaret wasn't sure she believed that. She lay on the floor, the phone pressed to her ear, listening to Emma cry. She thought about Derek. Where was he? Why had he left? Why wasn't he here? She wanted to be angry, but she didn't have the energy. All she could do was lie there and wait. The ambulance arrived faster than she expected. She heard sirens outside. Then she heard footsteps pounding up the stairs. The apartment door opened. Paramedics rushed in.
They moved quickly. They checked her vital signs. They asked her questions. How long had she been sick? What had she eaten? Had she taken any medications? Margaret tried to answer, but her words didn't make sense. One paramedic looked at his partner. "We need to move her now," he said. "She's in bad shape." They lifted Margaret onto a stretcher. One of them picked up Emma from the bassinet. "We'll take the baby, too," he said. "She needs to be checked out." As they carried Margaret out of the apartment, Derek appeared. He was walking up the stairs holding a coffee cup. He stopped when he saw the paramedics. "What's going on?" he asked. One of the paramedics turned to him. "Are you her husband?" Derek nodded. "Yeah, what happened?" The paramedic looked at him carefully. "Your wife is very sick. We're taking her to the hospital. You should come with us." Derek's face didn't show much emotion. He looked surprised, but not panicked, not the way you'd expect a husband to react. "Okay," he said, "let me grab my jacket." The paramedic found Derek's reaction strange. He made a mental note of it. Later, he would describe it as rehearsed, but right now there wasn't time to think about it. They needed to get Margaret to the hospital. The ambulance ride was a blur. Margaret drifted in and out of consciousness. She could hear the paramedics talking to each other, but she couldn't make out the words. She felt the ambulance moving fast. She heard sirens. She felt someone holding her hand. She hoped it was Derek. She wanted him to tell her everything would be okay. When they arrived at Mount Sinai Hospital, doctors and nurses were waiting. They rushed Margaret into the emergency room. They started running tests, checking her vitals. Everything moved so fast, Margaret couldn't keep up. She just wanted the pain to stop. One doctor looked at her chart. "She just gave birth 2 days ago," he said. "This could be postpartum sepsis." Another doctor shook his head. "Her symptoms don't quite match. Something else is going on." They ran more tests, blood work, scans. They were looking for answers. But what they found would shock everyone. This wasn't a normal postpartum complication. This was something much worse, something deliberate, something evil, and the clock was already ticking. Because while doctors tried to save her life, Margaret's body was shutting down, and no one knew why. The medical team gathered around her bedside. Dr. Rachel Winters, a vascular surgeon, was called in to consult. She reviewed Margaret's charts and labs. Nothing made sense. "This pattern doesn't match any postpartum complication I've ever seen," she said. "Her organ failure is too widespread, too fast." Another doctor suggested sepsis. Dr. Winters shook her head. "The blood work doesn't support that. No infection markers, no fever spike. This is something else." They ran a standard toxicology screen. It came back negative for common poisons, negative for drugs, negative for alcohol. The results only deepened the mystery. "What are we missing?" one of the residents asked. Dr. Winters didn't have an answer. She ordered more tests, more scans. They needed to figure this out before it was too late. Derek sat in a chair outside the ICU. A nurse had told him he couldn't go in yet. The doctors were working. He would have to wait. So he sat there, scrolling through his phone. He didn't look worried. He didn't ask questions. He just waited. Other families in the waiting area noticed. They whispered to each other, "That man's wife is dying, and he looks like he's checking social media." One nurse approached him. "Mr. Sullivan," she said. Derek looked up. "Yeah?" The nurse hesitated. "Your wife is very sick. The doctors are doing everything they can, but her condition is critical. Do you have any idea what might have caused this? Did she eat anything unusual? Take any medications?" Derek shook his head. "No, nothing unusual. She was fine yesterday. I don't understand what happened." The nurse studied his face. Something felt off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. "Okay," she said. "We'll keep you updated." She walked away, but she made a note in her own mind. This husband's behavior wasn't right. She had seen hundreds of families in crisis, panic, tears, desperation. But Derek showed none of that. He looked inconvenienced, not devastated. Back in the ICU, something new was happening. At 2:15 p.m., one of the nurses noticed Margaret's hands. They were changing color. "Doctor, you need to see this," she called out. Dr. Winters came over immediately. She looked at Margaret's hands. They were pale, almost white. She touched them, ice cold. She checked for a pulse in the wrist. Nothing. "Check her feet," Dr. Winters said urgently. Another nurse pulled back the blanket. Margaret's feet were the same, pale, cold, no pulse. Dr. Winters pressed on Margaret's nail. Normally, when you press on a nail and release, the color should return within 2 seconds. That's called capillary refill. But Margaret's nail stayed white. No blood was flowing to her extremities. Dr. Winters' heart sank. She knew what this meant. Her body is pulling all the blood inward to protect her vital organs, she explained to the team. Her heart and brain are still functioning, but everything else is being sacrificed. Peripheral circulation is shutting down. Her limbs are dying. The team worked frantically. They tried medications to improve blood flow. They adjusted her IV fluids. They checked and rechecked her vitals, but nothing worked.
Over the next hour, Margaret's hands and feet turned from pale white to purple. The tissue was dying. Necrosis was setting in. Dr. Winters made a decision. She called for a vascular ultrasound. The results confirmed her worst fears. There was no blood flow to Margaret's hands or feet. Zero. The tissue was already dead. If they didn't act soon, the dead tissue would release toxins into her bloodstream. It would poison her further.
She would die. Dr. Winters had to have a conversation she dreaded. She walked out to the waiting area. "Mr. Sullivan?" she called. Derek stood up. "Is she okay?" he asked. Dr. Winters gestured for him to follow her to a private consultation room. They sat down. Dr. Winters chose her words carefully. "Your wife is in critical condition," she began. "Her body is in shock. Her organs are failing. And now we have another problem. Her hands and feet have lost all blood circulation. The tissue is already dead. If we don't act immediately, the dead tissue will release toxins that will kill her." Derek stared at her. "What does that mean?" he asked. Dr. Winters took a deep breath. "It means we need to amputate. Both hands, both feet. It's the only way to save her life." The words hung in the air. Derek didn't react. He just sat there, looking at Dr. Winters. "Okay," he said finally. "Do what you have to do." Dr. Winters was stunned. No questions, no tears, no protest. Just do what you have to do? She had delivered this kind of news to families before. Usually there was shock, denial, grief. People begged for alternatives. They asked if there was any other way. But Derek just accepted it, like she was telling him about routine blood work. The surgical team was assembled. They prepped Margaret for emergency surgery. The first operation would be the bilateral hand amputation. They would do the feet the next day if she survived. The anesthesiologist put Margaret under general anesthesia. She had no idea what was about to happen to her body. The surgery began at 6 p.m. It lasted 4 hours. The surgeons worked carefully. They amputated both hands at the mid-forearm level. They tried to preserve as much tissue as possible for future prosthetics. They sutured, they bandaged, they moved efficiently. But the mood in the operating room was somber. This was a new mother. This was supposed to be the happiest time of her life, and instead they were dismembering her to save her life. While his wife was in surgery, Derek sat in the waiting room. He ordered food delivery on his phone. Pizza. He ate it slowly, scrolling through messages. Other people in the waiting room stared at him. How could he eat at a time like this? One woman whispered to her husband, "That's the husband of the woman in surgery, the one who's losing her hands." Her husband shook his head in disbelief. The surgery ended at 10 p.m. Dr. Winters came out to update Derek. "The surgery went as well as could be expected," she said. "We were able to amputate both hands successfully, but we'll need to do the same for her feet tomorrow. She's not stable enough for both surgeries in one day." Derek nodded. "Okay, thanks." That was it. No other questions? No emotional response? Dr. Winters walked away, disturbed by what she had just witnessed. Margaret was moved to a recovery area. She was still under anesthesia. Her arms were wrapped in thick bandages where her hands used to be. The medical staff who saw her cried. One nurse had to step out of the room. She couldn't handle it. This woman had just given birth. She was supposed to be holding her baby, and now she had no hands to hold anything. Before moving on, a quick thank you to everyone watching and supporting this channel. Your presence truly keeps it alive. This community continues to grow because of people who believe in real, meaningful storytelling. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. If you're still tuned in right now, write "I'm still here" in the comments. Let's see who's watching till the end. Don't forget to like this video too. Now, let's continue. The next morning, September 5th, 2023, the second surgery was scheduled. Margaret's feet had to go. The necrosis had spread. There was no saving them. The surgical team reconvened at 9 a.m. This time, the surgery lasted 5 hours. They amputated both legs below the knee. Again, they tried to preserve as much tissue as possible. Again, the operating room was heavy with grief. While the second surgery was happening, Margaret's sister Claire arrived at the hospital. She had flown in from Houston. She had been calling Derek for 2 days, demanding updates. He had been vague on the phone. "She's sick," he had said. "The doctors are working on it." But Claire knew something was terribly wrong. She booked the next flight out. When Claire arrived, she went straight to the ICU. A nurse stopped her. "I'm looking for my sister, Margaret Sullivan," Claire said. The nurse's face fell. "She's in surgery right now. Are you family?" Claire nodded. "I'm her sister. What's going on? Where's her husband?" The nurse directed Claire to the waiting area. There she found Derek sitting in a chair looking at his phone. "Derek?" Claire said sharply. Derek looked up. "Oh, hey Claire," he said casually. Claire was furious. "What the hell is going on? Why didn't you call me sooner? What happened to my sister?" Derek shrugged. "It all happened so fast. She got sick after we came home from the hospital. They brought her here. The doctors said her hands and feet were dying, so they had to cut them off." He said it so matter-of-factly that Claire couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Cut them off?" she repeated. "You mean amputate? My sister lost her hands and feet?" Derek nodded. "Yeah, that's what I said." Claire stared at him. She had never liked Derek. From the moment Margaret introduced him, something had felt wrong. But Margaret was happy, so Claire had kept her mouth shut. Now, standing in this hospital, looking at this man who showed no emotion about his wife losing 4 limbs, Claire's instincts screamed at her. Something was very, very wrong.
"Where's the baby?" Claire asked. Derek gestured vaguely. "NICU. They're monitoring her." Claire turned to the nurse. "Can you take me to see the baby?" The nurse nodded. As Claire walked away, she looked back at Derek one more time. He was already back on his phone. She made a mental note. When this was over, when Margaret was stable, she was going to get to the bottom of this. In the NICU, Claire found baby Emma. She was healthy, sleeping peacefully. Claire's heart broke. This tiny, innocent baby had no idea what was happening, no idea that her mother was fighting for her life, no idea that her mother would never hold her with her own hands. Claire gently touched Emma's tiny fingers through the incubator. "I'm your Aunt Claire," she whispered, "and I promise you, I'm going to take care of you and your mama. I promise." On September 7th, 2023, Margaret regained consciousness. It happened slowly. First, she became aware of sounds, beeping machines, hushed voices, footsteps. Then she became aware of sensation, pain. So much pain. Her entire body hurt. She tried to move, but something was wrong. She couldn't feel her hands. She couldn't feel her feet. Panic set in. Margaret's eyes shot open. The bright lights of the ICU blinded her. She blinked rapidly, trying to focus. A nurse appeared above her. "Margaret, can you hear me?" the nurse said gently. Margaret tried to speak, but there was a tube in her throat. She gagged. The nurse quickly called for the doctor. Dr. Winters carefully removed the breathing tube. Margaret coughed and gasped. "Where am I?" Margaret managed to say. Her voice was hoarse and weak. "You're at the hospital," Dr. Winters said. "You became very sick after you came home with your baby. We've been treating you for the past few days." Margaret's mind was foggy. She tried to remember. The apartment, Derek, the tea, the pain. Then nothing. "Emma," Margaret said suddenly, "where's my baby?" The nurse smiled. "Your baby is fine. She's healthy and safe. Your sister is taking care of her." Margaret felt a small wave of relief, but something still felt wrong. She tried to lift her hand to touch her face, but her hand didn't move. She tried again. Nothing. Margaret looked down. What she saw made no sense. Her arms ended at the forearms. Where her hands should have been, there were only bandages. She stared. Her brain couldn't process what she was seeing. She looked at her legs. Same thing. Her legs ended at the knees. More bandages. No feet. For a moment, Margaret just stared. Then the reality hit her all at once. She screamed, a raw, primal scream that echoed through the ICU. "No, no, no," she cried. She tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't cooperate.
Nurses rushed over. Dr. Winters tried to calm her. "Margaret, please, you need to stay calm. Let me explain." But Margaret couldn't hear her. She was hysterical. She thrashed in the bed, trying to move limbs that were no longer there. "What did you do to me?" she screamed. "What did you do?" Dr. Winters signaled for sedation. A nurse quickly administered medication through Margaret's IV. Within seconds, Margaret's screaming faded. Her eyes fluttered. Then she was unconscious again. The medical team stood around her bed, shaken. This was the part they had dreaded, waking up and realizing what had been done. It was always traumatic, but for Margaret, a new mother who should have been holding her baby, it was especially cruel. Dr. Winters sat down at her desk after leaving the ICU. She couldn't stop thinking about the case. Nothing about it made sense. Margaret had been perfectly healthy during delivery, no complications, no warning signs. Then 48 hours later, complete organ failure. And now they had been forced to amputate all 4 limbs to save her life. What could cause this? Dr. Winters pulled up Margaret's medical records on her computer. She reviewed every test result, every scan, every note. Then she saw something. The initial toxicology screen had been negative, but that screen only tested for common substances. What if this was something uncommon, something rare? Dr. Winters picked up the phone and called the hospital's toxicology lab. "I need you to run an expanded panel on patient Margaret Sullivan," she said. "I want you to test for everything, every toxin, every poison. I don't care how rare it is. Test for it." The lab technician agreed. It would take time, but they would do it. Within hours, the toxicology lab called back. "Dr. Winters, we found something," the technician said. "Amatoxin. It's in her blood and urine, high concentration." Dr. Winters felt her heart drop. Amatoxin, a toxin found in deathcap mushrooms, one of the deadliest natural poisons. It causes liver and kidney failure. It mimics food poisoning in early stages. By the time it's detected, it's often too late. "Are you sure?" Dr. Winters asked. "Positive," the technician said. "This wasn't accidental ingestion. This was a large dose, intentional." Dr. Winters hung up the phone. Her hands were shaking. Someone had poisoned Margaret. Someone had deliberately tried to kill her. And Dr. Winters had a pretty good idea who. She pulled out her phone and called the hospital administration. "I need you to contact NYPD," she said. "I think there's something suspicious about this case. I think someone may have poisoned this patient." Within an hour, 2 detectives arrived at the hospital. Detective Sarah Bennett and Detective Marcus Cole. They were from Manhattan South Homicide. Detective Bennett was in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Detective Cole was younger, early 30s, methodical and thorough. They listened carefully as Dr. Winters explained the situation. A 63-year-old woman gives birth. 2 days later, she's poisoned with amatoxin. Now she has no hands or feet, and her husband's behavior has been strange from the beginning. Detective Bennett took notes. "Where's the husband now?" she asked. Dr. Winters checked with the nursing station. "He left about an hour ago, said he needed to check on something at the apartment." Detective Cole exchanged a look with his partner. "We need to talk to him," he said, "and we need to secure that apartment before he has a chance to destroy evidence." The detectives moved quickly. They obtained a search warrant within 2 hours. Judge Patricia Morrison reviewed the medical evidence and signed off immediately. "This is clearly suspicious circumstances," she said. "Get in there before anything disappears." By 4 p.m. on September 7, 2023, a team of police officers and forensic specialists arrived at Margaret and Derek's rental apartment. Derek was inside when they knocked. He opened the door, looking annoyed. "Yeah?" he said. Detective Bennett held up her badge. "NYPD, we have a warrant to search this apartment." Derek's face changed. He tried to stay calm, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear. "What's this about?" he asked. "Just step aside, sir," Detective Cole said. "We'll explain everything." Derek moved out of the way. The forensic team filed in, carrying equipment.
They photographed everything, they dusted for fingerprints, they collected samples. Derek stood in the corner watching them. His arms were crossed, his jaw was tight. "You're wasting your time," he said. "My wife got sick, that's all that happened." Nobody responded to him. One of the forensic specialists, Linda Chen, focused on the kitchen. She swabbed countertops, she examined cups and dishes in the sink. Then she opened the trash can. Inside, buried under other garbage, she found an empty vial. It was small, glass, with a handwritten label that had been partially torn off. She carefully bagged it as evidence. Detective Bennett approached Derek. "Mr. Sullivan, we need you to come down to the station to answer some questions." Derek's eyes widened. "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet," Detective Bennett said. "But your wife was poisoned. We're investigating, and right now you're the last person who was with her before she got sick." Derek swallowed hard. "I want a lawyer," he said. "Smart move," Detective Cole muttered under his breath. At the police station, Derek was placed in an interview room. He sat there for 3 hours waiting for his attorney to arrive. The detectives didn't mind. It gave them time to process the evidence they'd collected from the apartment. The vial Linda Chen found was sent to the lab for immediate analysis. Meanwhile, Detective Bennett went back to the hospital to interview Margaret, but Margaret was still heavily sedated. The trauma of discovering her amputations had been too much. The doctors were keeping her under until her mental state stabilized. So Detective Bennett spoke to Claire instead. Claire told them everything she knew: the age gap between Margaret and Derek, how Derek didn't work, how Margaret paid for everything, the whispers from neighbors, the strange way Derek had acted at the hospital. Claire's voice shook with anger as she spoke. "I never trusted him," she said. "But Margaret was so happy. I didn't want to ruin that for her. Now look what happened." Detective Bennett asked about Derek's background. Claire pulled out her phone. She had done some research after arriving in New York. Derek Sullivan grew up in Atlanta. He had a criminal record, minor stuff mostly, petty theft when he was 19, drug possession at 21, but no violent crimes. He moved to Texas 3 years ago. That's where he met Margaret. "How did they meet?" Detective Cole asked. "Online," Claire said. "Some dating app. Margaret showed me his profile. He said he was looking for something real, something meaningful. He said age didn't matter to him. Margaret fell for it. They married after 6 months." The detectives wrote everything down. Then Detective Bennett asked the question that had been bothering her. Did Margaret have money, life insurance, a will? Claire nodded slowly. Margaret inherited money when her first husband died, about $800,000. She also owns a house in Houston worth about $300,000. And yes, she has life insurance, $2 million. Detective Cole looked up from his notes. "Who's the beneficiary?" Claire's face hardened. "Derek. She changed it right after they got married." The detectives had their motive. That evening, the lab results came back on the vial found in the apartment. It tested positive for amanotoxin residue, the same toxin found in Margaret's system. The detectives now had physical evidence linking Derek to the poison. But they needed more. They needed to prove Derek had purchased the amanotoxin, and they needed to establish a timeline. Detective Bennett started pulling security footage from the neighborhood around the apartment. She spent hours reviewing camera feeds from nearby businesses. Then, at 2 a.m. on September 8, 2023, she found something. September 5, 2023. A man matching Derek's description walking into a small herbal shop in Lower Manhattan. Detective Bennett zoomed in on the footage. It was definitely Derek. She noted the timestamp, 11:47 a.m. She made a note to visit that shop first thing in the morning. At 9 a.m. on September 8, 2023, Detective Bennett and Detective Cole walked into the herbal shop. A bell chimed as they entered. The herbal owner looked up from behind the counter. "Can I help you?" he asked. Detective Bennett showed her badge. "We're investigating a poisoning case. We have reason to believe someone purchased amanotoxin from this shop on September 5th. The herbal owner's face went pale. "I keep records," he said quickly. "Everything's documented." He pulled out his handwritten ledger and flipped through the pages. "Here," he said, pointing to an entry. "Derek Sullivan purchased amanotoxin extract on September 5th, paid $340 cash."
The shop owner's hands were shaking. He said it was for digestive issues. I told him to be careful. I told him it was dangerous. I had no idea he was going to hurt someone." Detective Cole photographed the ledger entry. "We're going to need the original," he said. The shop owner nodded. "Of course, whatever you need." Back at the station, the detectives now had everything they needed: the timeline, the purchase, the physical evidence, the motive. They brought Derek in for formal questioning. His lawyer, Thomas Rodriguez, sat beside him. "Derek, we know you purchased amatoxin from the Herbal shop on September 5th, Detective Bennett said. "We have the shop owner's ledger with your signature. We have security footage of you entering and leaving the shop. We found the vial in your apartment, and we have lab results showing the same toxin in your wife's system." Derek didn't say anything. His lawyer whispered something in his ear. Detective Cole leaned forward. "Your wife almost died, Derek. She lost her hands and feet. She'll never hold her baby. She'll never walk again. And you did that to her. Why?" Derek's jaw clenched. He stared at the table. Finally, he spoke. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he said quietly. His lawyer put a hand on his arm. "Don't say another word." But Derek kept talking. "I just wanted her to get sick enough to lose the baby. I thought if she lost the baby, things could go back to normal. I didn't know it would do all that." Detective Bennett felt sick. "You poisoned your wife to make her miscarry?" Derek nodded. "The baby complicated everything. I couldn't leave once the baby was born. People would judge me. They'd say I abandoned a newborn. I'd look like a monster." "So instead, you became a monster," Detective Cole said. Derek looked up at him with empty eyes. "I didn't mean for her to lose her hands and feet. I just wanted the baby gone." The confession was recorded. Derek was formally arrested and charged with attempted murder, assault, and reckless endangerment. His bail was set at $5 million. He couldn't pay it. He was taken to Rikers Island to await trial. News of the arrest spread quickly. Local news stations picked up the story. 26-year-old man arrested for poisoning 63-year-old wife after she gave birth. The story went viral. People were outraged. How could someone be so cruel? How could someone poison a woman who had just given birth? The comment sections filled with anger and disgust. Back at the hospital, Margaret was finally stable enough to be told what happened. Claire sat beside her bed, holding what was left of Margaret's arm. The doctor had explained everything: the poison, Derek's confession, the arrest. Margaret stared at the ceiling. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just lay there in silence. After a long moment, she spoke. "I trusted him," she said. Her voice was hollow. "I loved him. I thought he loved me." Claire squeezed her arm gently. "I know," she said. "I'm so sorry." Margaret turned her head to look at her sister. "Where's Emma?" she asked. Claire smiled softly. "She's in the NICU. She's perfect. Do you want to see her?" Margaret nodded. They brought Emma in a portable bassinet. The nurses lifted the baby carefully and placed her on Margaret's chest. Margaret looked down at her daughter. She couldn't hold her. She would never hold her. But she could feel the weight of her. She could smell her. She could see her tiny face. And despite everything, despite the pain and the loss and the betrayal, Margaret felt love. "I'm sorry, Emma," Margaret whispered. "I'm sorry I can't hold you, but I'm here. I'm alive, and I'm going to be here for you. I promise." Claire wiped tears from her eyes. The nurses in the room were crying too. It was the saddest and most beautiful moment they had ever witnessed. Over the next few weeks, Margaret began the long process of recovery: physical therapy, occupational therapy, learning how to function without hands or feet. It was brutal. Every day was a struggle. But Margaret refused to give up. She had a daughter who needed her. She had a life to rebuild. Claire moved to New York temporarily to help. She brought Emma to visit Margaret every day. Margaret learned how to bottle feed Emma by holding the bottle between her forearms. It wasn't the same as holding her with hands, but it worked.
Emma didn't care. She just wanted her mother, and Margaret was there. The legal proceedings moved forward. Derek's trial was scheduled for March 2024. His lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal. The prosecution refused. This case was too egregious. They wanted the maximum sentence. Meanwhile, more details about Derek emerged during the investigation. Detectives discovered he had been having an affair. Her name was Jasmine Washington. She lived in Houston. She was 24 years old. Detectives interviewed Jasmine. She admitted to the relationship. She said Derek had told her he was going to leave Margaret after the baby was born. He said he would get Margaret's money in the divorce. He said they could start a life together. Jasmine claimed she had no idea Derek was planning to poison Margaret. She seemed genuinely shocked when detectives told her what had happened. "Did Derek ever mention the baby?" Detective Bennett asked. Jasmine nodded. "He hated the idea of it," she said. "He said the baby ruined everything. He said Margaret only got pregnant to trap him. He said he needed to fix it." Jasmine's testimony would be crucial at trial. It established premeditation. It showed Derek had been planning something for weeks, maybe months.
The trial began on March 18, 2024. The courtroom was packed. Media outlets from across the country sent reporters. The story had captured national attention. Margaret attended every day of the trial. She sat in the front row with Claire beside her. She wore prosthetic hooks on her arms. She was learning to use them, but it was still difficult. Her wheelchair was customized to support her amputated legs. Derek entered the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He didn't look at Margaret, not once during the entire trial. The prosecution presented their case methodically. They showed the ledger from the Herbal shop with Derek's signature. They showed security footage of Derek purchasing the amatoxin. They showed the vial found in the apartment. They presented Margaret's medical records showing the toxin in her system. Dr. Rachel Winters testified. She explained how amatoxin works, how it destroys the liver and kidneys, how it causes multi-organ failure, how Margaret's body had shut down so completely that amputation was the only option to save her life. The jury listened in horror. Jasmine Washington testified. She described her relationship with Derek. She shared text messages where Derek complained about the pregnancy. She shared his plan to leave Margaret and take her money. Then Margaret testified. The courtroom went silent as she wheeled herself to the witness stand. The bailiff helped position her wheelchair. Margaret looked directly at the jury as she spoke. "I loved my husband," she said. "I trusted him completely. I gave him everything, my home, my money, my heart. And when I finally got the miracle I had prayed for my whole life, he tried to take it all away. He tried to kill me, and when he failed, he left me like this." Margaret held up her prosthetic hooks. "I will never hold my daughter properly," she said. "I will never brush her hair. I will never tie her shoes. I will never feel her hand in mine. He took that from me. He took that from Emma. And for what? Money? Freedom? Whatever his reason, it wasn't worth this." She gestured to her body. "It wasn't worth destroying 2 lives." The defense tried to argue diminished capacity. They claimed Derek had been under extreme stress. They claimed he hadn't understood the consequences of his actions. They claimed he never intended to cause permanent harm. The prosecution dismantled every argument. They showed Derek's internet search history, searches for how much amatoxin is lethal, searches for amatoxin symptoms, searches for how to get away with poisoning someone. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree, assault in the first degree, reckless endangerment. The judge scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later.
On April 5, 2024, Derek Sullivan stood before Judge Morrison for sentencing. The courtroom was packed again. Margaret was there. Claire was there. Emma was there, sleeping in Claire's arms. Judge Morrison reviewed the case files. Then she looked at Derek. "Mr. Sullivan," she said, "I have presided over many trials in my career. I have seen terrible things. But what you did to your wife is among the most cruel and calculated acts I have ever encountered. You poisoned a woman who loved you. You poisoned a woman who had just given birth to your child. And when she survived, you showed no remorse. You showed no empathy. You showed nothing but cold indifference to her suffering." The judge paused. The courtroom was silent. "For the crime of attempted murder in the first degree, I sentence you to 25 years to life in prison. For assault in the first degree, I sentence you to an additional 15 years. These sentences will run consecutively. You will serve a minimum of 40 years before you are eligible for parole." Derek's face went white. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder. The bailiff approached to take Derek into custody. As he was led away, Derek finally looked at Margaret. Their eyes met for just a second. Margaret didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just stared at him with cold, hard eyes. Then he was gone. After the sentencing, Margaret spoke to reporters outside the courthouse. "Justice was served today," she said. "But justice doesn't give me my hands back. It doesn't give me my feet back. It doesn't erase what happened. What it does is protect other people from him, and that matters." A reporter asked if she forgave Derek. Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Forgiveness is complicated," she said. "Right now, I'm focused on healing. I'm focused on my daughter. I'm focused on building a life. Maybe someday I'll forgive him, but not today." Margaret returned to Houston in May 2024. Claire had arranged for her house to be modified with ramps and accessibility features. Margaret began intensive therapy. She learned to use advanced prosthetics. She learned to type using voice commands and adaptive devices. She learned to care for Emma with the help of nurses and family members. It was hard. Some days were harder than others, but Margaret kept going. In June 2024, Margaret started a blog. She called it Living Forward. She wrote about her experience, the pregnancy, the poisoning, the amputations, the recovery. She wrote about the challenges of being a disabled mother. She wrote about the small victories, the first time she successfully changed Emma's diaper using her prosthetic hooks, the first time she fed Emma solid food, the first time she made Emma laugh. The blog went viral. Thousands of people followed her story. They sent messages of support. They sent donations. Disability rights organizations reached out. They wanted Margaret to speak at events. They wanted her to be an advocate. At first, Margaret wasn't sure, but then she realized something. Her story could help people. Her survival could inspire others. So she said yes.
By September 2024, 1 year after the poisoning, Margaret had become a public figure. She gave interviews, she spoke at conferences, she partnered with organizations that supported survivors of domestic violence and poisoning victims. She raised money for prosthetic research, and through it all, she raised Emma. Emma was a happy, healthy toddler. She didn't know yet what had happened to her mother. She just knew that her mother loved her, that her mother was always there, that her mother was strong. Margaret often thought about what Derek had taken from her: her hands, her feet, her sense of safety, her ability to trust. But he hadn't taken everything. He hadn't taken her life. He hadn't taken her daughter. He hadn't taken her strength, and he hadn't taken her future. Margaret was still here. She was still fighting. She was still living, and that was everything. The story of Margaret Sullivan shocked the nation. It raised questions about age gap relationships, about financial exploitation, about the warning signs of domestic violence. Experts weighed in.
Psychologists discussed coercive control. Medical professionals discussed the dangers of amatoxin. Legal experts discussed the importance of thorough investigations. Margaret's case became a teaching tool. It was studied in medical schools. It was discussed in criminal justice courses. It was referenced in domestic violence training programs. But beyond all the analysis and discussion, Margaret's story was ultimately about survival. It was about a woman who lost nearly everything but refused to be defeated. It was about a mother who loved her daughter so much that she learned to navigate the world without hands or feet just to be there for her. It was about resilience in the face of unimaginable cruelty. And it was about hope. Because even in the darkest moments, even when everything seemed lost, Margaret found a reason to keep going. She found Emma, and Emma was worth everything. Today, Margaret continues to advocate for survivors. She continues to raise Emma. She continues to live her life fully, despite the limitations Derek tried to impose on her. Derek Sullivan remains in prison. He will likely spend the rest of his life there. He has given no interviews. He has issued no apologies. He simply exists in a cell, paying for what he did. Margaret has moved on. Not moved past it. You don't move past something like this, but moved forward. She has built a new life, a life that looks different than she imagined, but a life that is still full of love and purpose and meaning. And every day when Emma calls her mama, when Emma smiles at her, when Emma needs her, Margaret knows that she made the right choice. She chose to survive. She chose to fight. She chose to live. And that choice made all the difference. This is the story of Margaret Sullivan, a story of betrayal, survival, and unbreakable love. A story that reminds us that even in our darkest moments, we have the power to choose how we respond. Margaret chose strength. She chose resilience. She chose life. And in doing so, she became an inspiration to thousands. Her story will not be forgotten, her strength will not be diminished, and her message will continue to resonate. You can survive anything, you can overcome anything, and you can still find joy on the other side. Thank you for watching Unseen Crime Stories. If this story moved you, if it made you think, if it reminded you of the strength of the human spirit, please share it, leave a comment, tell us your thoughts. And remember, behind every true crime story is a real person, a real survivor, someone who deserves to be heard. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and never stop believing in the power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest evil.